Let there be light, and there was light, of course. Okay, so we are talking about the said God. We invite the spirit of the said God, Mother Eve. Of course, we are talking about our Mother Eve, the story that we have been given from the King James Version of the Holy Bible. But Eve really means that which is before any event takes place. Okay, so um, it's a good spirit to really call while we are on this presentation. So we invite Waters. I hadn't really invited Waters is still Mother Eve because of course we are talking about the waters from Genesis of chapter 1 verse 2 where the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the deep and God moved upon the face of the waters and so on. So we are talking about spirit. That's Mother Eve as well. So just to give you a flavor about the vastness of Mother Eve, the Spirit of God is still Mother Eve, who moved upon the face of the deep, but still Mother Eve. Everything's Mother Eve, basically. Now, Mother Eve is now, of course, calling us home to this understanding that she is indeed everything. She is the serpent in the Garden of Eden. She is the serpent that was present. Of course, serpent and present is really the same thing. You just change the letters around. Excuse me, and you will discover that a serpent, it really is very present. You can't not acknowledge a serpent's presence. Okay, so Mother Eve, of course, we have learned that there were 14 gods in the Garden of Eden, and we have learned that 14 gods in Genesis, 9 gods in Genesis of chapter 1 and 5 in 4 in I need to get okay, Mother Eve, and 5 in chapter 2. Okay, so basically, yes, Mother Eve, we're getting. I'm just so excited here because I really want to talk about Job and I'm going into Genesis. But we have seen how everything is one as we are talking about Mother Eve. So I have done the first presentation on Job and I'm really seeing that there is a strong correlation or strong impression from that story that gives it's that gives credence to the Kundalini. That's what I want to say. That's what I am saying right here. So basically, Job, who was a very righteous man, a perfect man, who did no wrong. He was wealthy. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. Of course, there was the story about God and Satan had taken on this game, that bet, really to really test Job, for Job to really prove his loyalty to God. Of course, God knew that Job would keep his loyalty to, I say, to some extent. Of course, we can see through the story of Job, the way it's written is that it said that Job did not curse God, although his wife had told him to. Why don't you just curse God and die? That's the juiciest part for me, really, in all of this. Because why would someone say, why don't you curse God and die? Why don't you just curse God and die? And there was no there was no mention of her afterwards. There was no mention about this wife, if she was reprimanded, if she was, how an awful thing, was it blasphemous to say something like that? It would have seemed so, but no, there was no mention of that. I like the way people really defend this part of the story and say, oh well, the story was really about God. It was really about God, and Satan and Job. Yes, okay. It was really about Job. That's what they would say. Yeah. It was really about Job. It wasn't about Job's wife. But what about Job's friends? what about his friends that got reprimanded? They had to go and get seven bullocks or whatever it was, or sheep or something, and take it to Job for Job to pray for them. But yet they would defend the wife. Oh, well, we don't know about the wife, but then it didn't matter. Why didn't it matter? That part of the story is so juicy. I know I have said that in other presentations, but we will see how that correlates perfectly with the story of Adam and Eve. This is why I go back to the Bible as well, with the serpent and the said God and Adam and Eve. So I hope you stick around in this. But I want to really again now, in case you have just joined us with this story, I would urge that you watch the first part of this presentation, which would be, I have to rename it, but Job, it starts with Job. Job would be having a Kundalini, put it this way, but it would be ending with AAA, the letters AAA. And of course, this would be BBB. Okay, so basically, Job was so righteous because he was one, of course, of honor, and he was reputable in the community, of course. He was a rich man. He had 10 children. So I want to explore the sons. We have done about the sons. We have so far discovered there's a strong correlation with the 7 sons and the 3 daughters. Of course, the 3 daughters, we haven't seen exactly how they play out here, but what I have discovered, as I well thought, that the 7 sons was coinciding with the 7 chakras. Now, the calamities that happened to Job was that the first thing was that there was something called the Sabians. I don't know what the Sabians mean, but I think it would, I get the inclination or the impression that it's some sort of beams of wood or something, but they fell on the oxen, and of course there was they fell on the oxen, and then there was or there could be a nation or people as well, or who sort of overpowered them or whatever, because the servants were also slain. So the servants were slain. There was another thing. So there another person escaped. Let's say a person escaped to give Job the account of what had happened. That was the first thing that happened. But in each thing that happened, in each event, there were two sets of losses in each event, we could say, or each report that was given to Job. There were 2 events of what happened. Let's put it this way. Okay, but 2 things happened. So things fell and the servants were slain. The 7 daughters, or the daughters, had gone to the house of the sons, and there was a huge wind. That's another event. A huge wind, and it had taken the 4 corners of the house. There's another thing. The word house means 5. It equals 5. So it took the 4 corners of the house. I am liking to see how this is showing up with Mother Eve. Of course, Mother Eve, please show us how that really shows up. And then the servants there was I think a fire or was slain. There were 2 sets of things happen, but we are talking about something fell, there was wind, there was fire. So we have those elements right there. Now, when we talk about fire as well, we see that deals with the color red, we could say, deals with the lower chakras. Of course, we see wind had taken, there was wind, and I think wind was, I'm not sure for what number that came about, but that also, not quite sure with which chakra that we could say wind would be. But however, we are talking about the elements were present in those scenarios as well. So, and I'm looking at, this is all in Job, the book of Job in chapter 1. All right. And just thinking as well. So he was a man from the land. The word land as well equals 13, like we are doing here. And he was from the land of Oz, which is UZ. And if we do a numerical value for that, it would be 8 plus 3 is 11. I have seen how 11, so he was from the land. I have looked at 11 as the spinal cord here. I have done it like this. So this is a symbol of the two serpents, the male and female. That would be important to look at, to igniting or activating the Kundalini. Okay, so let's just leave this here. We have looked at 6 and 5. I'm not quite I don't clearly remember where I got 6 and 5 from in this sense, but adding this together, we see that they come together here as 6 and 5. 6 and 5 is where we are required to come into this new state, which is the end of a cycle, because the word end equals 5 as well, which is the 6 here, which is the number of man. So men, which of course if we turn this upside down, or we were to read this upside down, would be men, is the number of number 6 right here, which is where we are required to get into this mouth, this number 8, number 5 for the mouth, and to get into the nose, the to know who you are. This is what it's about. Know thyself. Now, I had this thing about thyself, but it's like saying know the depth of yourself as well. It's THY, to know thyself, but the word DIE still comes to mind. It's like you need to know that you die of that self, the lower self, and to get illuminated. Now, isn't that delicious? I think it is. You may not think death is nice or sweet, but when you have activated your Kundalini, and when you have activated, well, still your pineal gland, whatever you want to see it, and you become enlightened, meaning that you were able to see things in a way you had never seen before. For me, the joy is that you are able to see such beauty in life that you had never been able to see before. I remember standing just looking at butterflies. Just looking at butterflies, and I was one of them, you know, and it just took me back to when I was a child running, trying to catch butterflies, that we did that. And in that instant, a poem just derived. Yes, remember me? You know, that's what was happening there. Remember me? I was having a dialogue with the butterflies right there, and it's saying, "Oh, well, I'm not sure I remember you. Yes, you used to try and hold me, of course, you know, and you used to say that I would be your friend forever, whatever." I was in this childlike poem. Okay, we won't really go into it, perhaps one day. Okay, but there was the beauty and the joy. I was really immersing myself in the spirit of these butterflies right there and then. And of course, butterflies are transformation. They are a very good symbol of transformation. So if you see butterflies floating around you, yes, know that you are being transformed, or there's a confirmation of your transformation happening there. So back to Job, of course. So we had these three things happen. Now there's the other thing. There is a verse that talks about 3 bands. Now I wasn't clear at the time, wondering what those 3 bands might mean. That is towards the last thing that happened, and I think I just want to really read this 3 bands again and see what it says about those 3 bands. Okay, it's right here, and it's on. Oh wow, this is 3 bands. The image of 3 circles overlapping each other comes to mind. Okay, all right, but it's while he was yet speaking, that is one of the servants or the person who went to report to Job about the catastrophic things that were happening. So while he was yet speaking, there came also another, meaning like another messenger, and said, and I like the word said here because we are talking about the said God. The said God is transpiring here because that's the God of words and the God of wisdom and the God, and he said, whenever we're hearing about said, of course, it's the gift of words being, so it's that the Chaldeans are made but 3 bands and fell upon the camels and have carried them away, yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Now I like the words here as well, and I only am escaped. So the word I only am is something for us to pay attention to, and the last 3 words as well, to tell thee. So I'm going to look at those words as well. So basically I'm looking at the 3 bands here. So it does speak of, and it's on verse 17. So we know verse 17 is where God is really God's presence is there, we could say, on 17, because that's the set God we are talking about there. Now, we see as well that 1 plus 7 equals 8. But also, when we do the numerical value for the word one, O-N-E, that equals 7. So we can see how 1 and 7 is really one and the same. There we say that there is one God. In essence, that's what we say. Okay, now just to recap on all of this, just to before I go on too much. So we saw that Job had 10 children. That 10 children correlate very perfectly with the first word of the said God, meaning Mother Eve, when she said, let there be light. So we see in Genesis of chapter 1, there were 8 entries for the said God, for Mother Eve, in Genesis of chapter 1, where she says, let there be light, and there was light, and let the waters from the firmament and those from beneath. I haven't really revised all of this. And let there be a firmament, and then let the waters, and let there be light in the firmament and in the earth, or to give light upon the earth. So there were 2 sets of verses pertaining to light, and there were 2 sets of lettings. We say lettings. It's like you're letting, allowing, but it's a contract, because here in Britain, this is how my mind really works now, because it's to draw the references. When I go and look for a place to rent, for instance, there I'm looking for the word let, or I see a sign that says, oh, let by Davis or whatever, or lettings. I would go for lettings if I had to Google rooms to let or apartments to let. That's what we do. So let is right here, and it's on the 8th let, as we see. That word let equals 10, and it is of 3 letters. So it's also, we see that the number 3 coincides very well with the 3 bands that we have just read in Job. Now, not only that, the word Job or Job equals 9. So we see 3 threes a 9. So we see the significance of 3 there again. Okay, and of course, there were 3 reports given to Job. Three servants, or 3 reports of 3 events had taken place, and in that job. The job remind me of the Italian job. Not that I remember much about it, but Yes, the Job. In fact, I remember the Italian Job in which is a movie, in the sense that I feel that it really has a correlation with the story of Job. So of course in my leisure time, which I don't have leisure time, I'm just having time, I will one day of course try and find out the correlations there. But back to this, we see that the word, the last lettings that Mother Eve is making, which Mother Eve is calling us to instruct us right now to to give us the instruction and to nurture us through this, which we see the us is 31, and of course the number 31 is equals 4, but it also mirrors the number of for sons. This is what we are talking here. Now, not only that it mirrors 13, it also coincides with the very last word of Job, of the book of Job, when it says, and Job, of course, saw many days, or his grew to a ripe age, something to that effect. But the last word in the book of Job is the word days. The word days is in direct correlation with sons and days. Now, I don't know why I'm getting this image from what I have also explored, that days may also mean daughters too. The word daughters, of course, equals 31. So we are seeing that the numerical value is still 4, because daughters is 31. Now, the other thing that is very significant there too, because in the story of Job, where it says that there is something that happened here, where the last messenger went to Job and gave this account, and he said, well, the beams fell upon your children, well, something to that effect. The house, the four corners of the house fell, and there was, and of course the sons and the men got killed. The men died, or the men meaning his sons. So it says the men, not your sons. These are things that we need to pay attention to, because that story is written so eloquently and so psychologically as well, because we are talking about numerology here. This is a numerical construct. So basically, when you see the word man, we are also talking about the number 14. M-E-N, of course, this is 455. So this is 14. We are talking about Mother Eve right there. So, here, oh, it fell on the man, whatever. But we see how Mother Eve is present in this story as well, when we look at men. Now, isn't it men here as well, as I say, right here, M-E-N. So basically, there is a dying of the lower chakras happening, and of course, men, which I'm of course need to re-examine how that happens here. But the men, of course, we see it's here. We talk about house as well. The house fell. The word house is 5. So basically, this is where we are being called to get illuminated. When you are in Christ, again, the Christ spirit, you are a new creature. All this is where Mother Eve teaches us how to eat of the fruit, how to get set, get ready, get set, and go to the high chamber, which is what Christ called the high chamber, getting illuminated. Now, of course, as I say, this equals 5, and here we have 8. Now, the 8, of course, is the whole. We could see it's whole, it's not broken. And we learn that Mother Eve, as serpents, the serpents eat their food whole. They eat the food whole. Whatever it is, they eat it whole. So this is what we are talking about here. Now, going back to what we want to explore here is that is the three events that happened, and we see in the last event it says that the men, it gives the impression that the men got killed. I have to read this again, bear with me. So okay, Job, come speak to me right now. Okay, so so on the last report, the last event, I think it is the last, yes. Okay, so we have the last one. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness and smote the four corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men. And they are dead. They are dead. Okay, and we are talking numbers. So even they, in that sense, would be 10, 15, that would be 24. So it's number of man. Okay, they are dead. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Okay, so basically, before there is the thing in verse, so this is verse 19. Verse 18 is while he was yet speaking, that's one of the messengers, there also came another who said, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. Eldest brother's house. All these are very, very symbolic in this story. So it's not just a brother's house, the eldest. There is a message there. Now, but the men died, but however, it is that in the end it still says, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. So no more mention about the daughters there at all. There is no other mention about the daughters. Is that the men, they are dead, and of course, but the daughters were there too. No mention of that. Yeah, but I only am escaped to tell thee. So what happened to the daughters there? The daughters, of course, as I say, equals 31. And of course, we see at the end of it, there is 31. Now, the number 13, as I say, is very symbolic, or 31, which is still here. When we get to this, in this column here, of course, 4 here is very symbolic too, because 31 is 1, 3 plus 4 is 1. This is where I say that you get to this stage here. Where you get to this stage, you have come from the sack. Basically, Job would have had to come from the sack there. There was no comfort for him anymore. This is where he had to come from the sack. One, and we see that there were 3 messengers. So by the time the 3rd messenger had come, of course, he knew his luck. There was no question of luck around him anymore. And we see that this is equaling 6, 1, 2, 3, equaling 6, as we have said. But however, from this, he had to get to, I love the way Mother Eve is right here. As I say, Eve is always there, ready to help us getting into this 5th dimension. So in that developmental stage, this is D, your north, south, east, and west. That's what we are talking about. This is where Job had to come to. Now, to show you that that was where Job had to be in this stage after coming out of the sack. There is no comfort there. There is, it's like a fish out of water. When you add these numbers together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4 altogether, that comes to 10. This is why it is said 10, of course, that Job in the end had his 10 children again. Okay, but of course we see that that was also corresponding with 1 because he started with 10 children as well. Okay, now not to stray too much on that point, but where here I am really saying that the hour in the word sacrifice here, hour is that number. It coincides with 9 as it will here, because 9 is the number of birthing. So he had to develop a new mindset. We see the 3 here is present here again under that developmental stage. 3 plus 4 is 7. He had 7 sons. Okay, now is that's the 7 sons here that is now showing me that there was a working with the 7 chakras happening with Job. It was about the 7 chakras here. He was examining his north, south, east, and west. Now, that wasn't easy for Job at all, because here we're talking about the 7 sons, because Job, he was not getting it. He was still on this high note about his self-righteousness. I feed the poor. I give to people. People who look at me right now. People used to make way for me when I go to go out on the street. People used to take their hats off to me, and now even the very people that I used to feed, they squander me. They don't even acknowledge me. And he was going on like this. That is what happens to us. That is what the state of affairs that we get faced with when we need to deal with the lower chakras, when we need to really die of that self. This is where Paul in the Bible says that I die daily. He had to be, some people, of course, are faced with it, like taking it a bit at a time. But with some people, a big catastrophic thing had to happen. With someone like Job, he would not have got it any other way, because he was so self-righteous, he could not get it any other way. So what happened is, in each of the 3 state of things that happened to Job, if I did this well, was it 3? 2, 4, 6. Actually, it's in 4 stages. Those things happened. I need to just make sure that I have this really correct. So it's in 4. So it was 4 reports. Behold, there came a great riot. In 4 reports. So again, these 4 things, which reminds me about the little pigs and the house blue. Okay, so it was in 4 segments those reports happened, but on the last one, of course, we have seen that the sons died, but the daughters did not. There's no report that the daughters died. So there's what we are faced with. So we could say 7 things happened, or if you want to include that, the house, of course, when it fell down, but there was the loss of lives in that those events that happened, and the loss of the ship got burned. Now that's another thing, the ship got burned. That really is another symbol of sacrifice, because didn't they used to burn sheep as a sacrifice, the sheep? And of course they were in the Old Testament too. There are times where you talk about burning, and God, it's like saying God liked the smell of the burnt grease or burnt fat of the animal. So all those things were very symbolic for sacrifices. We see that right there. So when we look at the story of Job, as I say, that those events match perfectly within numbers of what of creation, we could say as well, but it also matched perfectly with the 8 entrance or entries of the said God, when Mother Eve said, "Let there be light." More or less, that's what was happening in the life of Job. Mother Eve was saying, "Let there be light," and there was light. And of course, she wanted Job to understand the processes of this creation that was happening, or what had formed him. It's no wonder towards where Job or God spoke and says, "Where were you when I formed the earth? Where were you at when I tied the boundaries of the earth together? Where were you when the waters were gushing out? Where were you when I about the womb?" God was speaking to Job so profoundly, sorry, to get him to really think, to really get him to go back to, as I say, the child, being the child, being, not getting into this pompous self, but really getting into the low state of humility and understanding that there is something deeper, something profound, that you are not about goat and sheep and oxen and your children. You are about getting into the consciousness of source, that your makeup. So Job had not understood that. Job had not understood. When Job was in being Job, like the job, his job was really about being a self-righteous individual, that he would pray like for his children. His children would go out and have fun, and he would pray and offer sacrifices in case they had sinned against God. Now, that's not to say that that is a bad thing, but he had not at any time showed, "Well, I am really happy that my children are going out to have fun," or "I am happy that my children, or I am being trusting that my children are being protected while I am out, so let me just trust God is going to look over them." No, 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 no. He was a control freak, we could say. He was a control freak because everything he did had to be done to perfection. And God was saying, if you are following this path, more or less, you do not know me. You think you know me, but you do not know me. This is why God was just on this long list of questions asking him, "Well, where were you?" There is so many books that God was asking him, "Where were you?" But there is a wonderful thing that was happening in the dialogue with Job and his friends before God was asking all these questions, because his friends too, they thought that they all were righteous. They were righteous. We could imagine that, I could see Job and his friends, on weekends or when they get together, they would be in a sort of competition about who is the wisest. They would probably be throwing words, and sentences and phrases, and to see if one understood what they were saying. And of course, there was the competition about, well, okay, it's the battle of wits. They were having that, and that transpired in the dialogue. But in the end, towards the end as well, there was the youngest of all. And of course, it's like, there's always a young man around these old men, because they had to be teaching someone, of course. They had to be teaching a younger person who was also eager to be wise like them, of course. And it was this, I think, is Elihu. his name would be, and it would be interesting to see what numerical value that his word would come to. Eliu. Eliu, of course, the word or lie. Eliu. Okay, let's take this off. That's interesting. But Eliu, the young man, he says, I have listened to every one of you. I have listened to all of you. These, you are wise men, but I am really like embarrassed to say that I have to speak now and I have to speak because I've listened to you guys, and basically, I can't hold my feeling anymore. And then he had to really say, I hope you really listen to what I have to say. Because you men talk about wisdom, but you all are not wise at all. You all have not really taken into consideration that that God is the God of who formed the earth to the depth. So he was talking a wisdom that that they had not looked at before. Anyway, let's look at Elihu. Elihu. Okay, so this is, and of course with E, that is where Mother Eve is present again. Mother Eve is present here. I am believing that this probably means like 8 or 7. Well, let's see. I haven't done the numerical value. So this is 8, 3. Okay. So there we are. Or have I done it? But if I did, I haven't recalled. Okay, so this is 20. This is 20. 28. Now 28 is 10. That's perfect. I thought it would be 8, but there we are. So Elihu. So there's the perfect. The real perfect one had come looking and facing Job, squaring him in the face and really telling him about himself, what he had not known about himself. Okay, so so with Job and his friends, of course, as I say, they were right, and they went through all this thing. They were basically trying to get Job to understand or really have deep introspection. Why would he be in such a dilemma, you know, of really having all these boils on his skin? And you know, Job, of course, you could say he was having hallucinations at one stage, because one minute he was really still with God, the next minute he would want to see God and ask God a few questions and see if God could really answer him the questions that he really wanted to know. There was so much going on with Job. But what I want to say before I want to conclude, that the 7 sons will really very much the 7 chakras that Job had to deal with. Now, there we see the other thing, that number 13 equals 4, and 4 is really like the heart chakra. So basically, 7 in this stage here, although it has the with this hair, it's like, of course, we have seen the symbol of the 2 S's. We have broken it down as 2 serpents. The 2 S's are 2 serpents, male and female. We have, this is where I got the 65 actually, and we have looked at the on. It's like on. So the 2 serpents are on the spinal cord. This is what we are saying here. This is what Mother Eve wants me to say here. And so 6 plus, and 6, of course, the number of man, and 5, of course, is Eve. So we have Eve representing present here as well. But when we add 6 plus 5, of course, is 11. 11 is as Jesus as well, and Jesus. So this is where now I am getting another thing with Jesus. Jesus is here, the spinal cord, the column, because 11 is a column, right? And this is where Jesus had to be crucified. And in that crucifixion, there he became Christ. there he would, after being crucified, so the men would, you'd go through that crucifixion here, because 5 plus 6 is 11. So you get crucified here. This is where you get set. So basically the serum, which is the sexual juice, I call it, really is that which is get set, if we like, of course. And because I had done this before to see that 11 is also 8, or 11 we say is 9. But of course we have seen that 8, how 8 becomes 9. So there it goes into the mouth. It's the mouth. So it also is the very same symbolic notion or of having intercourse, you could say, here. But this is what Mother Eve is teaching us, how to know of the process or the procedure of having our third eye open. There's the bridge on the nose bridge. Of course, the word bridge equals 9. 9 is also the number, of course, that equals Job. J-O-B equals 9. That is the job. We have to go through that, through the bridge, to actualize in self-will love. That's the name of my book, actually, The Crimson Light, A Bridge to Actualize in Self-will Love. And that is what it was about for me too. So basically, we get into activating the third eye. So we see how the 7 sons had been very symbolic here. Job's story is not about just a man who was very rich and he had all these wonderful things and had this wonderful life, but towards the end, after having this dialogue, this was something that Job, I would have to do another presentation on this as well. But Job actually said, well, I had heard of you, he more or less said to God. I have heard of you, but I had not seen you before. This is where we know that there was a sight. His eye was open, not eyes. His eye was open. And then we will be talking about Job. Follow me again on the third presentation of Job, because this is about having a Kundalini experience, people. This is about